Hi there, welcome to Voices in the Boats. I'm Yang Wei. On March the 4th, 2014, Chinese Premier Li Keqiang told almost 3,000 delegates at the National People's Congress and many more watching live on state television, we shall resolutely declare war against pollution as we declared war against poverty. 4 years after that declaration, China is winning, having cut concentrations of fine particulates in the air by 32% in cities on average. Now, China will establish a Ministry of Ecological Environment to enhance environmental protection and has written building an ecological China into its constitution. So, how has China managed to reduce air pollution? Will it sustain these environmental improvements by writing such hopes into its constitution? What has been the human cost? To discuss these issues and more, I'm very happy to be joined in the studio by Mr. Ma Jun, Director of the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs, and Ms. Wu Changhua, Director of a Professional Association for China's Environment. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Wei. Welcome to our studio discussion here. To begin with, let's look at something positive. 4 years after Premier Li Keqiang's declaration, China is winning at a record pace a war against air pollution. In particular, cities have cut concentrations of fine particulates in the air by 32% on average. What were the practical actions used to achieve this goal?
A lot. I think we all recognize the efforts made by the government, by the society, including the business community there as well. I think a few things. On the emissions side, we have much better understanding of the sources of emissions for air pollution, including industrial, energy, transportation, among others. And in the meantime, on the other side, actually, laws, regulations are put in place to make sure the concentration, whatever ends up in the air, we need to control that part as well. So from the source and from the concentration, both sides, actually, the government has taken tremendous efforts on that. Secondly, I think there's something called a 10 action plan. 10 major action items were put in place, particularly, championed by Beijing and other cities there as well, and seriously address control and the pollution, because we know the sources of pollution. And if you look at the last 4 years, actually, tremendous efforts have been made by the government side there as well. And in the meantime, if you look at the new amended air pollution prevention and control law, which was regarded as the first environmental legislation in China that really has some teeth in it, meaning there's clearly defined liability and accountability of people, decision makers, accountable for air pollution. So with all the things, all the pieces of puzzle coming together, you're starting to see the foundation is laid on the ground already for this country to continue to step up its efforts to really address the air pollution.
Ma Jun, there's no question about the political will and the vision of this new generation of the communist leadership. However, when Wu Changhua said proudly that there are teeth in the first environmental protection law, what about the execution itself? So as I'm concerned, inspection teams have been sent out to make sure that no one would ever violate the law, otherwise they would be held to the account. To your knowledge, what can you tell about the execution and implementation? They are said to be very brutal.
Yeah, we did see a improvement in the implementation of the law. Finally, we're seeing the strengthening of the enforcement in China, which has long been, the weak enforcement has long been the real barrier against pollution control, because it costs a low cost of violation, and the companies have no incentives to really change behavior. But over the past 5 years, especially over the past 2 years, the central government have sent down thousands of inspectors throughout the country, especially in key areas, including Beijing and the surrounding regions, to check not just the companies, factories discharge, but also held accountable more than 10,000 officials who fail their duties, and therefore created a higher accountability system. I just give you one indicator. We as a group have been compiling the violation records from the official monitoring and enforcement records, and the past 10 years we compiled some 200,000, but last year we got 160,000 and plus several, 400,000 records, released for the for procedural violations. So you can imagine the government is doing a lot more. In the meantime, it's also making it far more transparent. Not just the day-to-day monitoring results have been disclosed, but even the online monitoring data has been released for over 10,000 major factories. This is the first massive real-time disclosure in the world, showing the political will.
Regarding the issue of accountability, is it just a matter of disciplinary punishment or criminal offense? I mean, they are found guilty of violating the law, and therefore they will be brought to justice. Chang Hua and Martin, what can you tell us?
Actually,
we
it's
want
both.
to be briefed.
Yeah, I think it's both. And as I mentioned, if you look at the environmental protection law itself, if you look at the air pollution, control and prevention law, there are very specific articles in it, and there are criminal charges if you fail to perform your duty. And I think that's as part of the teeth actually added into the amended legislations there. In the meantime, as Marjorie mentioned, actually, if you look at the administrative procedural part, there are obviously violations there as well. In many cases, probably they are not necessarily, to the extent of the, criminal charges, but somehow they still need to be held accountable to be punished.
Well, excuse me if the following question has some overtones of being a tabloid, but let me know whether the former leadership of Hebei province was replaced simply because of their inaction, indecision, and poor capability to carry out the will of the central authorities in protecting the environment. Because Hebei province, I'm talking about Hebei province, the neighboring province, failed to perform the duty, failed to protect the blue skies of the capital city. Do you think this case alone testifies to the political will of the new generation of the leadership?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the central government nationwide inspection, at the beginning, people, many officials would not take that quite seriously. But then, to the surprise of most people, that it touched upon the, it actually addressed the problem of the provincial level officials, not just Hebei, but then Gansu, for failing their environmental duties. This was very hard to imagine. And Hebei, as a province surrounding Beijing and Tianjin, is burning 300 million tons of coal. That is close to half of the total consumption in America. And then this province is having a huge, very, very energy and pollution intensive industry. To grow its economy in recent years, it actually overtakes most other provinces to be the #1 or #2 emitters on sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide. It's very hard to imagine.
Well, the draconian personnel reshuffle perhaps has a lot to do with the establishment of Xun'an new area to ensure that this is environmentally friendly. The next point concerning what happens about the environmental protection is the establishment of a new ministry. It's called Ministry of Ecological Environment, to enhance our public awareness as well as real environmental protection, according to a reform plan submitted to the national legislature for deliberation on Tuesday. How will this do anything differently from the previous ministry?
Okay, the name difference, formerly it's called the Ministry of Environmental Protection, now it's called the Ministry of Ecological Environment. From the term, there's a little bit of differentiation. Say, now you have the ecological element emphasized actually in the name of the ministry itself. Fundamentally, I think there are a couple of major shifts. One, for a long time, actually, the Ministry of Environmental Protection, of course, had its mandate and taking care of, just supervise, pollution discharges, whatever. But somehow, if you look deeper into it, there are many other related sort of mandates actually were not under the Ministry of Environmental Protection, and that has basically proven causing tremendous hurdle actually for the ministry to deliver its duty. So now if you look at the water, some functions actually from former Ministry of Water Resources shifted to agriculture and other sort of ministries now totally shifted, integrated into the new ministry. So you started to see the integrity, the thinking of the integrity of the ecology and the environment actually under the same mandate now. In the meantime, actually, there's another ministry called the Ministry of Natural Resources. Overarchingly, China is now championing ecological civilization, right? We are very much aware of the ecological red lines, the boundaries there. So the Ministry of Natural Resources pretty much will really focus on the ecosystem goods and the services. But in the meantime, there's another element about carrying capacity of the ecology and the environment that falls under the Ministry of Ecological Environment. So you do need a very strong, very powerful ministry taking charge of that element to make sure you're not only just talking about the dream, the ecological civilization dream, but rather you have a strong regulator to regulate, take charge of holistically the environmental quality, the environmental protection.
In a word, we used to talk the talk, but today we walk the walk.
We have to.
And we bear the teeth to show our serious attitude towards the execution and above all promoting public awareness. Martin, what do you make of the implications of having this new ministry? Perhaps a brief review of the history since 1988 when the first Environmental Protection Agency was built, and then step by step that was upgraded to the ministry level, and then today it's several ministries being combined together to form a novel idea about how to protect the ecological system. In your word, that's in fact ecological civilization.
Yes, I think you're right. It shows demonstrates the increasing recognition for the importance of environmental and ecological protection. I think all these years, we have seen the strengthening of the body, and this time it integrates all these functions from other ministries and make it far more powerful. And as Changhua put it, by taking taking all this jurisdiction from, for example, on water, it used to be scattered across the several ministries on the groundwater issue, the agricultural non-point source control issue, the river discharge point issue, the seawater. It's all scattered across 4, 5 ministries, and now it's all integrated. So the new ministry can better unify and coordinate all these efforts to control the issue, finally the phenomena, the so-called phenomena of 9 dragons.
Yeah, 九龙之水. I was about to say that. 9 dragons handling water resources.
Yeah, hopefully it will come to an end.
It's a decentralization of the power. Many overseas media reports may have misunderstood why powers were concentrated in fewer hands since the inauguration of the new generation of the leadership. It's because of the more effective and efficient coordination of policy execution. Taking environmental protection as an example,
because
that highlights the political will, right?
Yeah. Because in the old system, whenever there's interest, where there's power, different ministries want to grab that, and whenever there's a real challenging issue, you will find
no one would like to take charge.
Really
what is called reform is actually a matter of how to reallocate interests, and that will undermine the interests of some of the groups. Building a beautiful China and ecological civilization has been written into the country's constitution. I mean, people have been talking about constitution, but I believe this the discussion of this issue of a constitution amendment may have been excessively politicized. Taking environmental protection as an example, what does a constitutionally enshrined mandate mean for people like you, experts, as well as government officials?
What is the Constitution is the basic law, meaning all the other laws, actually regulations, are made on the foundation, on the basis of the Constitution. So I think that's a major differentiator in terms of where you you put the sort of ecological, beautiful China, ecological civilization, or environment element. So now it's officially into the Constitution that forms a very, very strong foundation for not only today's existing laws, regulations, but also for future laws, regulations in terms of protecting the ecology, ecosystems, and the environment there as well. I think that's probably the fundamental differentiator of this major step forward.
Could you imagine this scenario, Margin, that senior officials of the Ministry of Ecological Environment should put their hand on the Constitution, pledge their oath, and say, I will do whatever I can to protect the Constitution and, of course, to substantiate the mandate with my commitment to real climate change and the protection of the environment one day in the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I would love to see that. I think it's very important, and for us to try to achieve this target of the beautiful China. You know, the initial target was supposed to be achieved by the year 2035, and now already the ministry is thinking about what should be the target for that. You know, for environmental protection. I think you know, a beautiful China need to be obviously a country with clean air, clean water, and clean soil for safe food, and sound ecosystem with rich biodiversity. And obviously, this is a very high target, and we're, you know, I think it can help mobilize the country to move toward that.
The evolution of public awareness about the environment actually witnessed some very interesting stories, such as, ironically, a few years ago, it's the U.S. Embassy in Beijing which first released the report on PM 2.5 that alarmed the local government, and the embassy came under fire from the Chinese authorities. Today, ironically, the general public followed the release of PM 2.5 very, very closely, and they feel strongly that it has a lot to do with their health. So what do you think of, for example, what happened in Beijing? Beijing authorities are priding themselves on bringing the city's PM 2.5 level below to 60 micrograms per cubic meter. Yet the World Health Organization recommends a maximum annual mean of 10 micrograms per cubic meter. What does the difference mean here?
It means we still have a long way to go. And I think the 60 microgram, the current where the Beijing is targeting for, definitely is going to be a major step forward based on where the city had been. So that's sort of progressing. But from the health perspective, we all know that's not healthy at all. And meaning, so if the air continues to be polluted at that level, we're going to sacrifice more people's health and life. And people's health and life, it then translate that into the GDP level. And there are many studies over the years from economists, from epidemiologists estimating the economic cost actually for air pollution. I remember back in the later 1990s, actually, the World Bank published a major report estimating air pollution, water pollution, and the part of agriculture sort of pollution there as well. In terms of the cost, the estimated number was somewhere as a range between 3 to 8% of China's GDP. So what does that mean? That means actually, yes, we continue to grow the economy, but actually, in the meantime, we are sacrificing, wipe out a part of it, a major part of it actually, because of the air pollution. So we are losing that sort of benefit. And that triggers a deeper thinking about, say, why we're pursuing high growth rates. Why we're not taking, consideration of environmental quality and its impact on health. I think if you look at the current mindset in China, say, rather than emphasizing the growth, the rate, the pace of the growth, now we are more shifting towards the quality. I think that's a sort of pretty much in that landscape of thinking, and China is already sort of on that track. Back to your question, as I said, it's a step forward. It's sort of in progress, meaning we have a long way to go. Just to be fair, even though WHO standard is there, China still faces challenges, but doesn't mean, say, developed countries do not have any problems at all. If you look at North America, Europe, air pollution continues to be a major challenge, not only outdoors but also indoors. Meaning globally, we need to still make more efforts to address air pollution.
The PM 2.5 particles, so to speak, have a lot to do with our immediate concern about the lung cancer. Look at the decline in the air quality in Beijing these days. It's very embarrassing that we are having the ongoing plenary sessions of the two events, NPC and CPPCC. This is the political season, the most important in Beijing, in China, each year without exceptions. However, we see the apparent decline in the air quality. Heavy hazardous fog descends on the capital city. Residents, Chinese and foreign alike, in the capital city of Beijing have strong reasons to be seriously concerned about the decline. And I'm afraid Mr. Xi Jinping must have been very left disillusioned about the setbacks on the long, arduous journey. What can you tell us about, such setbacks?
Yeah, in some way, the sense of setback came with this, the unexpected or extraordinary success made during the last, this winter season, this heating season, which is going to come to an end. In this season, the Beijing's air quality have been improved really dramatically. Beijing started our monitoring of PM 2.5 from the year 2013. That year, it's close to 90 micrograms, the annual average. But over the past 2 months, the average is below 40. In January, it's actually under 34. You mentioned about the 10, WHO standards of annual, average of 10 micrograms. In China, we have the healthy, the kind of if it is below 35, then it meets our healthy air quality, healthy air quality standard. This is the first time for Beijing. It's a monthly average to meet with that standard. It's very, very.
And therefore, we see more of the blue skies over the course of 2017, and even 1 year earlier, 2016. People feel happy and cheerful.
But this raises people's expectation for this to sustain.
We build up their appetite. Their
that's right. But we need to recognize, this winter is very, very unusual with the La Nina effect in the Pacific Ocean.
We didn't have any snowfall.
Yeah, but we have
very sad.
Cold front visiting Beijing every 2-3 days, cleaning up the city and push the dust, from the North China Plain to the southern cities, and so we're our neighboring cities. So we have not been quite affected. But unfortunately, during the past 10-15 days, we have seen a kind of a reverse or coming back to the normal kind of weather system. So with that, this extremely unfavorable weather condition. It demonstrates that even with such a dramatic cut of our pollution discharge, it's still above the carrying capacity of the air.
Indeed, we need to be more realistic about the uphill battle. For example, in replacing coal with gas. Taking infrastructure building as an example, it takes time. It's not just a matter of government investment. A couple of years back, we were able to install half of the added wind power of the whole world. That's amazing. China deserves credit for the rapid change and energy we injected into the use of clean and renewable energy. What do you make of the progress, and how difficult will it be in the future?
As you pointed out correctly, I think not only China but also global community, we all recognize China's efforts and commitment and the major contribution to transform the energy sector, particularly looking at wind and solar energy there. And there are a few contributions from China. One, we demonstrated actually the technology works. Secondly, actually, we could dramatically reduce the cost so that we lower the barrier for scaling up, and not only domestically but also globally. So we are contributing not only domestic energy restructuring but also to global community, and of course, contributing to the solution to climate change there as well. I think that sort of momentum sort of carries on because the installation is there already, but somehow if you look at the percentage in the overall energy structure, it's still small. meaning we still have a long way to go, and we need to carry on. We need to continue the momentum there. But then, of course, when you get to the certain point, then the cost, the investment, the business model, whatever, the policy change in terms of subsidies, feed-in tariffs, whatever. So there are new challenges we have to deal with. But somehow, a particular look at China, the determination, commitment to renewable energy, to addressing climate change remains. Carries on. So I believe actually the policy will continue to incentivize more investment into renewable energy, cleaner energy there as well. So it won't be like before the early stages. I think it's more like a new stage, new phase actually of the clean energy sort of revolution in China. I think that carries on even today. Actually, not only renewable energy, but also look at the electric vehicles. There are other sort of cleaner energy solutions, with new technologies on board, maturing, and we are bringing them into the economic, infrastructure.
We were addressing the issue of legislation and the approval of environmental protection law to promote public awareness and the sense of accountability for local government officials in particular. But horizontally, across the culture, what can we learn, or what inspirations can we draw from the Clean Air Act of the United States? To my knowledge, it's passed in the 1970s, and air quality was remarkably improved ever since. Other than the legislation, what about the market-based approach, such as carbon cap, the trade for low carbon, for low carbon development?
A cap-and-trade system was invented in the United States, first to tackle not carbon issue, but the sulfur issue, and it was very successfully. They set a cap and then give quotas to each major emitters, and then cut back the quota every year, and then have them to treat, to find the most cost-effective way to reduce their sulfur emission. It proved to be quite successful. So therefore, when the world is facing this global climate change, the nations decided to adopt this cap-and-trade system. In China, the cap-and-trade system was introduced in China by some global environmental NGOs, and also helped by some foreign agencies, and test run. But so far, it's not has not been playing the same kind of role.
Broadly speaking, is this part of our commitment to the Paris Climate Change Pact to undergo what is called carbon trade?
Yes, in a way, actually, this is one of the instruments that China decided to take on, and particularly addressing the cost-effective issue. There are many technologies there. Some of them probably very expensive. You cannot possibly install them today, but somehow there are many options there. You need market-based instrument to differentiate actually what is more cost-effective. So carbon trading, the trading platform is that sort of instrument to do so. As Margie mentioned actually, so China also copied the sulfur sort of the dioxide trading as piloting actually in some provinces there as well. But somehow it didn't really get to the situation like the U.S. In the Clean Air Act in the U.S., there's another very important factor. It's called best available technologies there. And so you cannot force industries actually to do whatever. Probably they wouldn't really survive. You have to figure out what the best available technology out there. I think over the years, China definitely has learned a lot in the Clean Air Act, adopt many of the best things into China. But somehow when you implement them, enforce the articles into the market, that still requires a lot of efforts on the ground.
Thank you so much. We are running out of time, but we failed to address other issues such as water pollution, soil erosion, because China is, after all, a big agricultural power. It takes time along the journey of discovery and rediscovery, particularly it's a learning curve. I thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Voices Votes, the same time tomorrow evening. Until then, goodbye.